Rejection Sensitive Dysphoria, RSD, the unspoken pain of ADHD. This video is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you're experiencing mental health challenges, please consult with a qualified healthcare provider. Have you ever felt physical pain from a critical comment? Not metaphorical pain, actual, crushing, can't breathe pain in your chest. Like someone reached into your ribcage and squeezed your heart. Have you ever replayed a single embarrassing moment for years? Not just remembering it, reliving it. Feeling the same humiliation wash over you like it just happened, even though it was 5 years ago. Have you ever been so terrified of disappointing someone that you completely froze and couldn't do the thing at all? And then felt like a failure for not doing it, which proved you were right to be terrified in the first place. If you're nodding right now, if your stomach just dropped, if you suddenly feel seen in a way that's almost uncomfortable, then you need to hear what I'm about to tell you. Because there's a name for what you're experiencing. And more importantly, there's a reason why it happens. It's called Rejection Sensitive Dysphoria. And if you have ADHD, there's a very high chance you've been living with this invisible condition your entire life without knowing it had a name: the hidden epidemic. Here's what's shocking. Between 70 and 99% of adults with ADHD experience rejection sensitive dysphoria. Let me say that again. Up to 99%. That's essentially everyone with ADHD, and yet most people have never even heard of it. RSD isn't officially in the DSM-5. It's not taught in most medical schools. Most therapists don't know about it. Even ADHD specialists sometimes miss it, which means millions of people are walking around with this absolutely debilitating condition thinking they're just too sensitive, too emotional, too broken to function like normal people. But here's the truth that nobody's telling you. RSD isn't a character flaw. It's not weakness. It's not you being dramatic or oversensitive. It's a neurological difference in how your brain processes perceived rejection and criticism. And the word perceived is critical here. Because with RSD, your brain doesn't just respond more intensely to actual rejection. It perceives rejection where none exists. A neutral facial expression becomes disgust. A delayed text response becomes abandonment. A casual comment becomes devastating criticism. Dr. William Dodson, who first coined the term rejection sensitive dysphoria, describes it as extreme emotional pain triggered by the perception that a person has been rejected, teased, or criticized by important people in their life. And for people with ADHD, this isn't occasional. It's constant. It's the background radiation of their entire existence. The neuroscience behind the pain. So why does this happen? Why are people with ADHD so vulnerable to this specific type of emotional pain? The answer lies in how the ADHD brain is wired. And this is where it gets really interesting, because we're starting to understand that ADHD isn't just about attention. It's fundamentally about emotional regulation. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for executive function, is also responsible for emotional regulation. In people with ADHD, this area shows reduced activity and connectivity, which means the brain's ability to modulate emotional responses is compromised. But there's more. Recent neuroimaging studies have shown that people with ADHD have differences in the limbic system, particularly the amygdala, which is the brain's emotional alarm center. The amygdala in ADHD brains tends to be hyperreactive to emotional stimuli, especially social and emotional cues. Now, combine these two things. You have an alarm system that goes off too easily, and you have a regulation system that can't calm it down effectively. That's the neurological basis of RSD. But here's where it gets even more complex. People with ADHD also have differences in their dopamine system. Dopamine isn't just about attention and motivation. It's also crucial for processing reward and punishment signals. And rejection is one of the most powerful punishment signals that exists for social creatures like humans. In neurotypical brains, when rejection happens, there's a proportional dopamine drop. It hurts, but the system recalibrates. In ADHD brains, that dopamine drop is more extreme and lasts longer. The pain is neurologically more intense and harder to recover from. And here's something that will blow your mind. Brain imaging studies have shown that social rejection activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. The anterior cingulate cortex and the insula, regions associated with physical pain processing, light up when people experience social rejection. That's why I asked at the beginning if you felt physical pain from criticism. Because neurologically, you have. For people with ADHD and RSD, these pain centers are hyperactivated. The rejection literally hurts more. It's not in your head. Well, it is in your head, but it's real. It's measurable. It's visible on brain scans, the childhood origin story. But there's another layer to this that makes it even more heartbreaking. Because RSD doesn't just come from neurology. It comes from lived experience. Think about what it's like growing up with undiagnosed ADHD. You forget things constantly. You interrupt people. You lose things. You can't sit still. You blurt out inappropriate comments. You start projects and never finish them. You're late. You're messy. You're not living up to your potential. And every single day, you're getting feedback about these things. From parents, from teachers, from peers, from everyone around you. Why can't you just focus? Stop being so careless. You're so smart. If only you'd apply yourself. You're lazy. You're irresponsible. You're too much. By the time you're an adult, you've received literally thousands of criticisms, thousands of rejections, thousands of moments where you disappointed someone, embarrassed yourself, or failed to meet expectations. And here's the devastating part. Because of your ADHD brain's hyperactive emotional memory system, you remember these moments with unusual clarity and intensity. Psychologists call this emotional hypermnesia. Your brain preferentially encodes emotionally charged negative memories, especially those related to social failure or rejection. So you're not just dealing with current rejection, you're carrying the accumulated weight of every rejection you've ever experienced. They're all there, perfectly preserved, ready to be triggered by the slightest hint of current disapproval. This is why someone with RSD might have an extreme reaction to something that seems minor. They're not reacting to just this moment. They're reacting to this moment plus every similar moment that's ever happened to them. It's like emotional compound interest. Except, instead of growing your wealth, it's growing your pain. The three faces of RSD. Now, RSD doesn't look the same in everyone. It typically manifests in three different ways, and understanding which pattern you experience is crucial. The first is what I call the people pleaser prison. This is where you become so terrified of rejection that you mold yourself into whatever you think others want you to be. You say yes when you mean no. You hide your opinions. You overwork yourself to the point of burnout trying to make everyone happy. You become a chameleon, constantly scanning for what others expect and contorting yourself to meet those expectations. The problem is, you can never relax. You're constantly performing. And deep down, you have this gnawing fear that if people knew the real you, they'd reject you. So the real you stays hidden, and that's incredibly lonely. The second manifestation is the rage shield. When rejection happens or is perceived to happen, instead of collapsing inward, you explode outward. The pain is so intense that your brain converts it to anger, because anger feels more powerful than hurt. You lash out, you get defensive. You might say things you don't mean. You might push people away before they can reject you. From the outside, you might look aggressive or volatile, but inside, you're dying. The anger is armor, it's protection. It's your brain's desperate attempt to not feel the unbearable pain of rejection. And the third manifestation is what I call the disappearing act. This is where perceived rejection makes you want to literally vanish. You withdraw, you isolate, you stop trying, you ghost people, you quit jobs or relationships at the first sign of criticism. You might even have thoughts of self-harm or suicide. Because in that moment, the pain feels so overwhelming that non-existence seems preferable. And here's what's really important. Many people with RSD cycle through all three of these patterns. You might be a people pleaser most of the time, but when you finally hit your limit, you rage. Or you might withdraw for weeks, then overcompensate by people-pleasing to try to repair relationships. The invisible disability. The cruel irony of RSD is that it's almost impossible to explain to people who don't experience it, because from the outside, it looks irrational. It looks like you're overreacting. It looks like you can't take criticism. Why are you so upset? I was just giving you feedback. You're being too sensitive. Not everything is about you. You need to develop thicker skin. But here's what people don't understand. This is about your brain experiencing a neurological emergency. When RSD is triggered, your nervous system genuinely believes you're under threat. Your fight-or-flight response activates. Cortisol floods your system. Your heart rate spikes. Your thinking becomes clouded. And the most frustrating part, you often know intellectually that your response is disproportionate. You can see it, but knowing it doesn't stop it. Because this isn't happening in your rational thinking brain. It's happening in your emotional survival brain. And your survival brain doesn't care about logic. Research by Dr. Russell Barkley, one of the world's leading ADHD researchers, has shown that emotional dysregulation in ADHD can be as impairing as the attention symptoms themselves. In fact, in many cases, it's more impairing. But because it's invisible, because it happens inside your head and heart, people minimize it. They see you functioning, holding a job, maintaining relationships, and they think you're fine. You're coping. What they don't see is the immense amount of energy it takes. The constant hypervigilance. The mental gymnastics you perform to avoid potential rejection. The way you replay every conversation looking for signs you messed up. The way a single criticism can ruin your entire week. Hope and healing. But here's what I want you to understand. If you're recognizing yourself in this video, if tears are streaming down your face right now because you finally feel understood, there is hope. First, just knowing about RSD changes everything. When you can name what's happening, when you can recognize this is my RSD being triggered, not reality, you create space. Not enough space to stop the reaction entirely, but enough to not believe everything your brain is telling you in that moment. Second, treatment helps. For some people, medication that addresses ADHD symptoms also reduces RSD. Alpha agonists like guanfacine and clonidine have shown particular promise. Some people find that mood stabilizers help, but medication is just one piece of the puzzle. Therapy is crucial, particularly approaches that address both the ADHD and the trauma responses. Because, yes, repeated rejection is traumatic. Cognitive behavioral therapy can help you identify thought patterns that amplify RSD, dialectical behavior. Therapy teaches emotional regulation skills that are specifically helpful for RSD, but perhaps most importantly, community helps. When you connect with other people who have ADHD and RSD, when you share your experiences and hear that you're not alone, when you're in spaces where people get it without you having to explain, that validation is healing in ways that nothing else can be. Because one of the most painful parts of RSD is the isolation. The feeling that you're the only person who experiences emotions this intensely. The fear that you're fundamentally broken, and when you discover that there are millions of others who experience exactly what you experience, who have survived it, who have built meaningful lives despite it, that changes something fundamental. Look, I'm not going to tell you that RSD ever completely goes away. For most people, it doesn't. It's a feature of how your brain is wired. And that's not going to fundamentally change, but what can change is your relationship with it. What can change is the shame you carry about it. What can change is believing that your intense emotions make you weak or broken or too much. You're not too much. You're just wired differently. And yes, that wiring comes with challenges, but it also often comes with incredible empathy, deep emotional connection, intense passion, and the ability to feel joy as intensely as you feel pain. The goal isn't to stop feeling. The goal is to survive the feelings, to build a life around your neurology rather than in spite of it. To find people who can hold space for your intensity without making you feel like you need to shrink yourself to be acceptable. You deserve that. You deserve relationships where you don't have to constantly monitor yourself for signs of rejection. You deserve work environments that don't trigger your RSD daily. You deserve to exist without constantly bracing for pain. And if anyone's ever made you feel like your emotional intensity is a problem, let me be clear, the problem isn't your emotions. The problem is a world that wasn't built with your neurology in mind, but we're changing that. One video like this at a time, one person learning about RSD at a time, one moment of recognition and validation at a time. You're not alone. You're not broken. You're not too sensitive. You're just human, living with a very real neurological difference that makes certain types of pain more intense. And now that you know that, now that you have the words for it, you can start to build a life that accounts for it. If this video resonated with you, I want to hear about it in the comments. Tell me when you first realized you had RSD. Tell me how it shows up for you. Because your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to feel less alone. And if you know someone with ADHD who might benefit from understanding RSD, share this with them. Because the first step to managing RSD is knowing it exists and that you're not the only one experiencing it. Take care of yourself. Be gentle with your sensitive heart. And remember, your intensity is not a flaw. It's just part of how you're wired. And there's nothing wrong with you. I'll see you in the next one. Remember, this video is for educational purposes only. RSD is not an officially recognized diagnosis in the DSM-5 and experiences vary widely among individuals. If you're struggling with intense emotional responses, rejection, sensitivity, or ADHD symptoms, please consult with a qualified mental health professional or psychiatrist who specializes in ADHD for proper evaluation and treatment.